Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about there's a viral video going around about a Deloitte employee being laid off. And this is in relation to a bunch of other layoffs at Deloitte. And then there's also supposedly going to be layoffs at PwC. And, she recorded herself being laid off. First of all, I don't know if this is authentic. I mean, maybe somebody's already verified it, but I didn't find much information on the video itself. But there's a Deloitte employee getting laid off, and she's being laid off by, I assume at the beginning, a partner at the Big Four at Deloitte. And then later on, she's talking to an HR person. And I mean, she really cries when she talks to the partner, but then sort of gets serious with the HR person. But the partner starts out laying her off by, going over the business, how the business is shaping up for 24, which I mean, I don't think that's the best way to lay somebody off because they're not invested in your business anymore. But I guess you're giving them a reason, but the way he says it is just terrible. And I guess that's how I believe that this video is probably authentic, because I could totally see a partner doing that. And then we'll discuss more of the video in a little bit, but the reason behind it is, I mean, it's the economy's not doing the best. It's not doing terrible either, but companies are waiting for the other shoe to drop because of inflation and just increased costs. And so because of that, they've cut back on a lot of costs, like consulting. Like if you're doing, a new ledger system or anything like that, you have a lot of money to spend on a whole bunch of new consultants at Deloitte to come in and help you out and put together PowerPoint decks. Then yeah, that's great. But, and I've said this over the however many years I've been doing this podcast, which is a number of years, that if you're in consulting, your job is never safe. The reason it might be shocking to people that get laid off is because they probably don't have an accounting degree. They have a simple bachelor's in something, and they have no credentials. If you have no credentials, you just have a basic bachelor's degree and you're working at Deloitte in consulting, doesn't matter what kind, then you can be laid off at any time. And this happens all the time at Deloitte. And it happens all the time at consulting whenever there's a downturn in the economy. It happened in the financial crisis. It happened during COVID, and it will always happen. If you want to prevent yourself from being laid off, you need to get credentials. You need to build your network. So any consultant that's surprised that they're getting laid off, I mean, bottom line, you shouldn't get surprised. They even lay off partners in consulting, because if your business completely dries up, then why should the big firms keep you? Now, did the Big Four do the right thing the way that they fired her? I don't think so. I think the people on the call just really weren't ready to do this, or, it was on a Friday and they just wanted to get out the door, because it was just very matter of fact. And they didn't really seem to have any care in the world about her. And she asked some good questions. She asked, am I the only one? Will I get severance? Can I negotiate the severance? I mean, I don't know what happened with her, but I could already tell you the Big Four really aren't going to negotiate a severance. Maybe a little bit, but they're not out there, especially if in her position, because I'm sure she was a lower level position. Like, you've only been there a few years. They're not going to be out here trying to give you huge severance checks. It's in your contract that they can fire you. So, I mean, to sit there and try and shame them, I don't think that's going to be successful. You might as well try it, right? Because it's your last time there. But if people are going to try and negotiate a severance on the way out, and that's the other thing too that made me think about this video, because you can tell she had already done her research. You can tell she had already seen this coming, because at one point she's emotional, but the next she's asking about negotiating and what are the terms and all this stuff. And so she knew this was coming. And that'll go to another point that I want to bring up. Typically in the Big Four, if you're going to be laid off, you know it, because you're not sitting with much work. The Big Four is all about metrics. So if you're utilized all the time and you're on projects that bring in revenue, you're not going to be fired. And I can tell you that. But if you're sitting around and you don't have much to do, then there's a strong chance that you could be laid off or put on a performance program or whatever. They'll come up with whatever reason they need to get rid of you. And also, I don't need the people in the comments to say, I don't know anybody that sits around in the Big Four and doesn't do anything. Well, then you haven't worked in the Big Four very much, or you've only worked around people in your group. There are plenty of people in the Big Four, including partners, that sit around with not much to do, or sit at home with not much to do. So I think this girl already knew that she was going to get laid off, and she had done her research, and she'd seen all these things that she can do at the end. But the other thing too in this video is that they talk about there's a separation agreement. So they're going to give you a piece of paper to sign. It's going to be a very formal process. The way that Big Four hires people, I'm sure they have a very thorough process of how they fire people. But now I'm also pretty confident that they don't train these people that separate people very well, because the way they speak to this person is terrible. And for returning her technology items, they're like, oh, you'll be returning your items at a returning event. Like an event? No, I'm pretty sure I'm just going into the office to to give back my technology. I don't know why you're calling it an event, but I mean, I think this video, it doesn't shock me the way it was done. And I mean, it's not like they did a remote meeting with her as well. I'm sure she probably didn't go in the office much either, but they did it on Teams or whatever platform they use to lay her off. So, but again, this doesn't shock me because it's in consulting. She probably didn't have much to do. And it doesn't shock me that the Big Four didn't lay her off in a better way because they're not prepared on most days. They're not prepared with their clients in a lot of ways. They're not prepared when a lot of them aren't prepared onboarding people, especially if you join during a weird time of year. They don't onboard the best either. But it doesn't amaze me that they weren't 100% prepared for that. But also, like, if you're gonna get laid off, I wouldn't go in thinking you're gonna get a lot out of that. Like, a lot of, to them, confess to a lot of things. Like, is this happening to me for some reason? Is this, how many people are getting laid off? Like, if you ask a whole bunch of questions and a bunch of demands, it's not really gonna work at that point because they've already done their due diligence. They've consulted with HR. They probably consulted with layoff firms, PR firms, etc. So if you go into that trying to ask a whole bunch of things, then I don't think you're going to get much out of it. But also, like, if you're sitting around and you're not doing a whole lot, or the people above you aren't doing a whole lot, that's a good time to get your resume polished up, to go looking for jobs. But also, if you want to work for the Big Four and you don't want to get laid off, well, get an accounting degree, get a graduate degree, and get a credential, and you're most likely not going to get laid off. But it's when you work in these weird consulting groups, or you work in mergers and acquisitions or private equity in the Big Four consulting, that you're going to get laid off. Now, those jobs are the best paying when the economy is doing great. But as the economy takes a little dip and people cut back on their acquisition budgets, then those people get laid off the fastest. And that's the easiest to tell too, because all the investment firms, all the companies have the same investment bankers, all the private equity firms talk to each other, and they all stop investing at the same time. And when that happens, the partners know, and then they start laying people off. So those are just some things I wanted to cover today. I'll put the link to the video in the description. So thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe. Thanks again.